365 days can make a tremendous difference in both life and the sports world. And a year ago, the Detroit Lions had just finished a season in which they went 3-13-1 and were getting ready to cheer on former franchise quarterback Matthew Stafford and the Los Angeles Rams in the playoffs. And a year later, they are in a fantastic position and are very much a team on the rise. But this didn't happen overnight. This wasn't a gimmick here or there, or head coach Dan Campbell displaying a persona to the media to build hype around the Lions. And while the Lions finished the 2022 season with a 9-8 record, they still went through their fair share of shit throughout the 2022 season. But that will make this team better in the long run, and the Detroit Lions are doing everything right. And in today's video, we're going to break everything down. What's happened over the past few years, how they got to where they are now, and how they set themselves up for future success. And there is a lot to dive into in today's video, and without further ado, let's begin. On January 20th, 2021, Dan Campbell was hired as the Detroit Lions head coach and immediately made headlines by saying how much grit this team would play with and take on the identity of the city. They would scratch, claw, get knocked down, bite a kneecap on the way back up, and ultimately be the last one standing. Fast forward to October of 2022, and things were not looking good. They were 1-6 and were coming off of a year in which they finished with the second worst record in the NFL, and at this point in time, Campbell had a 4-19-1 record as the head coach. A lot of people were understandably disappointed with the Lions and thought, great, here we go again, and there were rumblings that Campbell might be 2-out as the coach. And I've been a big supporter of MCDC since he became the head coach, and you couldn't help but think the inevitable was going to happen when the Lions were this bad. Within the 1-6 start, they got shut out in New England with a score of 29-0, and they were beat by 3 scores in Dallas with a score of 24-6. There were also a lot of posts about how Giants head coach Brian Daboll had more wins in his first 7 games than Campbell had since he became the Lions head coach, as Daboll started out 6-1 as the Giants were on their way to a playoff berth. But the Lions never quit. They finished the year 8-2 to end the season with a 9-8 record, and during this 10-game stretch to end the season, they averaged 28 points per game and finished the year with the 5th most points in the NFL. And within this 10-game stretch, they swept the big bad Green Bay Packers, they swept the Bears, which isn't that impressive as they have the number 1 overall pick for a reason, but they also beat the division champion Minnesota Vikings. Detroit finished 2022 with a 5-1 record in the division and gave the Philadelphia Eagles, the number 1 seed in the NFC, everything they had back in week 1 and nearly beat them, as they lost with a score of 38-35, and they nearly beat the Buffalo Bills on Thanksgiving Day as they lost 28-25. They finished 9-8 a year after having the 2nd overall pick with 5 one-score losses, and in 3 of those games, the Eagles, Bills, and the first game to the Vikings, they nearly beat 3 division champions. And of course, they did beat Minnesota the second time around. Within this, aside from battling through a ton of adversity, there are countless things to be happy about with how their 2022 season went. Aiden Hutchinson, the Michigan man, had 9.5 sacks and was 100% worth the number 2 overall pick. Per PFF, he led all rookies with 53 pressures, and if you were to include the 2021 draft class along with this, Hutch would be 3rd behind only Micah Parsons and Jalen Phillips of the Dolphins. He capped off his impressive rookie year with a 2-sack performance against the Green Bay Packers in a game that also eliminated them from the postseason. And another reason why the Detroit Lions are doing everything right, as simple as this sounds, there wasn't a player on that team that didn't want to end the Packers season. The 3-time defending division champion Packers. The big brother to them is all most of them heard since they became members of the Detroit Lions. And they held them to just 3.7 yards per carry, and Aaron Rodgers threw for just 205 yards as they won 20-16. And watching the game, you could tell the Lions were hungry as hell. Jamal Williams averaged 4.5 yards per carry and had 2 rushing touchdowns, and set the Lions' single-season record for rushing touchdowns with 17. He was also the NFC Offensive Player of the Week for Week 18. Safety Kirby Joseph, the same rookie safety who picked off future Hall of Famer Aaron Rodgers 3 times in 1 year, tweeted, "If we're not going, y'all aren't going either." And I can honestly say if the Lions made the playoffs, there is nobody that would have wanted to play them as hot as they were closing the season. And that's not to say the Lions couldn't have been beat in the postseason, because if they went to San Francisco, they probably would have gotten beat in the first round, but they would be a handful for anybody. And over the past 2 years, and really since they traded Matthew Stafford, there was this belief that Jared Goff is just a bridge quarterback and he'll be here for 2 years and be done. But Jared Goff quietly had himself a year in 2022. He finished tied for 5th in passing touchdowns and 6th in passing yards, and had the 6th highest yards per attempt out of any quarterback in the league. This team that already has a lot of young talent and players like Amon-Ra St. Brown, the aforementioned Hutchinson, and of course 2021 first-round pick Penei Sewell, has 2 first-round picks this year because of the Stafford trade, and of course their own pick, and as I record this, they have 2 picks in the top 20. Oh, and because the Rams finished 5-12, their first-round pick is number 6 overall. So while everyone talked about the Philadelphia Eagles' 2 picks this year because of the Saints trade last year, the Lions quietly made out in a big way. And what could benefit them even further is having teams like the Texans and Colts draft in front of them, as in quarterback-needy teams. So we're looking at 2, maybe even 3 quarterbacks being taken in the top 5 before Detroit would pick, presumably being Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and Will Levis. And because the Lions have a lot of draft capital, don't rule them out trading up for a premier talent like Jalen Carter or Will Anderson. It is assumed at this point the Bears will take one of those guys or trade back and secure getting one of those guys, but the Lions also have 2 second-round picks, theirs, and the Vikings' second from the TJ Hawkinson trade. In addition to Aiden Hutchinson, they also have James Houston from the 2022 draft class, who had 8 sacks as a rookie, and 2022 second-rounder Josh Pascal, but don't rule out Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes trying to acquire an elite talent like Carter or Anderson. Detroit, in a lot of ways, is in the driver's seat in terms of the 2023 draft because they can sit at number 6 and acquire a good player by default, or use some of their other picks to trade up. I mean, imagine Hutch and Jalen Carter on the same defensive line, then have Malcolm Rodriguez, a 6th-round pick from 2022, who had 87 tackles in his rookie year, playing cleanup behind them. I wouldn't rule it out, and I don't think the Lions will go this route, but there is always a possibility of them doing an Eagles-type trade with a team where they acquire their first-round pick next year. Unfortunately, because of the results we've seen with teams like the Broncos and Saints, I think that will scare some teams away from doing a trade like this, but that is, in theory, on the table. One of the biggest takeaways, or one of the most impressive things about the Lions' 2022 season, is how many points they scored without one of their first-round picks contributing as much as he will in 2023, and that is, of course, Jameson Williams. Jameson's speed is unreal, and he presents a threat defenses have to account for on every play, and even when teams play it right, he is so damn fast he can simply outrun them. There was a touchdown called back in Week 18, and while watching the game before Jameson even turned the corner, I said, he's gone, they're not going to catch him, and the defenders weren't even close. And this unique weapon is being added to the 5th highest scoring offense, with a running back that had the most rushing touchdowns in the NFL by far in Jamal Williams, while also having a good second back in DeAndre Swift. They also have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who just posted a 106-catch, 1,100-yard second season. And because of Jameson's speed and having to account for it on every single play, this offense becomes even more difficult to stop. And the question defensive coordinators are going to have to ask themselves every week when playing this team, and one they are certainly going to lose sleep over, is where do we start and what do we try and take away? The Lions' offensive line is very good, and during the 10-game stretch to end the season, Jared Goff threw 17 touchdowns to 1 interception and was sacked just 10 times. That would equate to being sacked just 17 times over the course of the season, which is insanely low, and during these final 10 games, Goff was not sacked in 4 separate games. Heading into 2023, this offense truly has no weakness. And if you point to Jared Goff being a weakness, sure, he may not be Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, and he's not, but he doesn't have to be. Admittedly, I thought heading into the 2022 season that Goff would have a rather pedestrian 2022, similar to what he did in 21, and throw maybe 20 to 22 touchdowns to 11 or 12 picks, and the Lions would go 5-12 and have a top 7 draft pick. And they do have a top 7 draft pick, but not in the manner I thought they would. And Jared Goff played like a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback down the stretch of the 2022 season. One of the biggest things about succeeding in the NFL is how you respond to adversity and how you respond to getting knocked down. This team had every reason to quit when they were 1-6. They were putting up points and they were getting close, but they couldn't seal the deal. And their loss to the Vikings back in Week 3 represented this in every possible way. Dan Campbell, for as much as I love the guy and think he will succeed in the long run in Detroit, you can argue made a decision to lose them the game and seal their fate. It was 24-21 with 1 minute and 14 seconds left to play, and the Lions had a 4th and 4 on the Vikings' 36-yard line. If they get the first down, the game is over and they improve to 2-1. And out of the 3 decisions they could have made, go for it, take a delay of game and pin the Vikings inside of the 10-yard line with a punt, or kick a field goal. Dan Campbell chose to kick a field goal. The 54-yard attempt was missed, and the rest is history. Kirk Cousins led a game-winning drive, and the Vikings ended up winning this 28-24. And even if they made the field goal, it would have been a 27-21 game, and the Vikings could have scored a touchdown and won in regulation, which they ended up doing anyway. But these types of coaching decisions were things Dan was heavily criticized for, because it was a lot of, you're saying all the right things and you're doing the little things right, but we aren't seeing results. But this all changed in a Week 9 game when they beat the Packers and the ball was rolling from there. The Lions are not the same old Lions, and they are going to have 4 picks in the top 2 rounds of the NFL draft to improve this roster even more. And when they do, well, simply put, the NFC North is up for grabs next year, and there is a very real possibility Dan Campbell wins a playoff game as a head coach, and I would not bet against MCDC and the Detroit Lions. And that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as it would mean the world. And until next time, as always, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.